Hey, everybody. This week we have a heated conversation. I mean, not like we don't get heated with our guest, but our guest gets heated about the things that he's passionate about, which is mental health and mental health advocacy, in particular, head trauma advocacy. Our guest this week is former NHL player Daniel Carcillo. And if you are an NHL fan, you probably know who this man is. He was a badass enforcer in the NHL, and he is now a head trauma and concussion advocate who speaks out about the awful state of player support and player awareness surrounding head trauma in the NHL. And when I said it got heated, what I mean by that is that Daniel has some choice words for the NHLPA, and it made for an absolute fascinating conversation. We also dive into his advocacy work for alternative therapies like psilocybin, which if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you know that we are big fans of. So please enjoy this beautiful conversation with our friend Daniel Carcillo. Oh, and by the way, before I throw to it, Breathless, I'm going to plug it right here. Our new series that we've put together here at Snack Labs is now out. It is a podcast in partnership with Cystic Fibrosis Canada, and it delves into the story of my experience with CF, but also looking into the future of CF for patients living with the disease when there is now a life-changing medication that is available to a large percentage of those folks, but still not everyone. So Breathless is available wherever you get your podcasts. And I really, really, please take a moment, go give it a listen. We're really proud of this work, and I hope you get to check it out. Okay, so with that, here's our conversation with Daniel Carcillo. Look out, Bruce Buffer. Fucking move over, buddy. We are hanging out with our new friend Dan. Do you prefer Dan or Daniel?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I like Daniel. Daniel's it's a good feeling. It feels good in the mouth. Daniel.
That is my name.
Daniel, the fucking car bomb, Carcillo. Mm-hmm. And no, Daniel is not a UFC fighter, although I would say that would be a pretty fucking bitchin' UFC
it would be
nickname. But you do know a thing or two about throwing knuckles, I'm sure. Daniel, you're a former NHL hockey player, turned mental health and emerging medicine advocate. And today we're going to be talking about all things sports, concussion, psychedelics, and the sort of ups and downs of being a pro athlete. And luckily, it seems for you, Daniel, you've kind of, you had a career in the NHL, but you didn't come out of that career basically completely down and out, which I think, is not something that's super uncommon. And you're also putting your foot forward to really make a difference and highlight some of the important shit that I think most sporting organizations should probably be focusing quite heavily on. So, I mean, before we get into it all, Daniel, please introduce yourself to all of our listeners. Give us a little bit more insight into who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. Daniel Carcillo. Played 12 years professional hockey, 10 in the NHL, 2 Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks, 164 fights.
No big deal.
7 diagnosed concussions, thousands of hits. My job was to ensure that people like Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Jeff Carter, skilled players were able to operate without feeling, the need or pressure to fight. And I would hold people accountable when necessary and change the momentum of a game with a hit, with a fight. So it's an art, to knowing when to do it, when not to. I've obviously made some mistakes doing it when I was younger and when I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And there's one very public mistake that I made with Talbot, but we got drafted to the same organization. He's a great dude, and we laugh about it when I was on the Flyers. But retired early in 2015 at the age of 30. So concussions took away my career very early, and that's really when the biggest fight of my life started to happen. I made that decision by myself, no help from the medical professionals in the league or from the NHLPA, which is a union that we paid. And when I made the decision, it was mainly because my friend Steve Monador had passed away. He had 19 concussions in the league. And all these stories were coming out from the NFL and the concussion settlement in 2013 and Junior Seau and guys just killing themselves at a rate that's never really been seen before because they were being diagnosed with this neurodegenerative disease that's linked to repetitive head trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to, luckily I had means because I earned it and I worked so hard, gave up a lot of my youth and had the means to see all the best medical professionals. So I did that for about, 2 years, but their answer was to prescribe me pharmaceuticals and kind of take the easy way out. So when I got off of those, I had a couple of seizures and this was 2017, started to go to some concussion rehabilitation centers, stroke rehabilitation, vestibular ocular training, things of this nature. And paying cash, so a lot of cash, like $1,500 a day cash. So they target some pretty, the wealthier side of people. And and after I did that, I found out that was pretty much bullshit, just like the pharmaceutical side, because they wouldn't take. I was very learned, meaning I was reading PubMed papers. I was talking to other professionals, and they wouldn't take my blood, my hormones, understanding what my body's naturally creating. There's no exercises that you can do to kind of switch that on. And so I quickly realized that they needed me in their clinic in order to make money. And so then I started to, when I moved away from the pharmaceuticals and doctors, started to do like float tanks, hyperbaric chambers. A little bit more holistic stuff, sticking acupuncture in my brain, and that really helped. But again, managing things, right? Hormone replacement therapy. Didn't want to be on 12 different statins and supplements. So after I kind of went through that, I started to see some research that was emerging at places like Johns Hopkins, NYU Langone, some major academic institutions. I started to see some companies going public that were working with, LSD, working with psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and I thought maybe this could work. So I took an invitation in 2019 to Denver, which was the only decriminalized state at the time for psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. There were a bunch of studies, man. There was studies in the 50s, 60s, 70s that I went and read up on. There was stuff coming out of brains under fMRI. I don't know if you guys have seen the image, but it's a circle and brain hemispheres communicating that had never been seen before. And so a light went off and I was like, wow, this might be able to work. At the time I was very suicidal and just dealing with slurred speech, headache, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues, light sensitivity, weight loss, appetite loss, short-term, long-term memory loss, anxiety, depression, on top of wanting to take my own life because I thought, you become a burden to people. And I had 3 young kids. I didn't want them to see me, living that way and thinking that it was normal. So I went and I partook in a ceremony or a journey, and it was 5.6 grams. So it was the hero's journey, which is always difficult, never easy. And I woke up the next day and I remember just kind of feeling the way I should, and I knew that these were stigmatized substances. So I took some diagnostics on the front end and then I retested my brain 6 months later after 2 high doses and a very specific regimen of microdosing. And I had no abnormalities. I had in the brain, I had completely clear blood work. Testosterone was equalized, free testosterone, cortisol levels. And I knew that I had found something. And so I started to get involved in policy. I started to use my platform to speak about these medicines. After a year, I waited a year. And then I founded a company, raised some money, got some drug developers together, created a team, took it public on the CSE. That was a big learning lesson and in business. And I did that for the last, call it 2.5, 3 years and ended up selling the NASDAQ to a NASDAQ listed company, the drug development program that we started with the FDA, and then owned and operated 2 psychiatrist-led clinics that were using FDA-approved ketamine. Packaged that up. We expanded to a 3rd and sold that, and I'm just winding that down. And now onto some other things as an entrepreneur. We have Healing Realty Trust, where we saw a gap in these FDA-approved medicines to expand clinical footprints, and very passionate about policy. Sit on the board of Psychedelic Medicine Coalition, work closely with a veteran organization called No Fallen Heroes. Matthew Wiz Buckley, former Top Gun pilot, just an all-around great dude, connects families and first responders and veterans to this psychedelic-assisted therapy. And opening a clinic in Oregon, which is the first legal state in North America where you can actually do psilocybin or magic mushroom ceremonies. Yeah, that's a
wow,
long introduction. But yeah,
I mean, what a first of all, thanks for laying out that entire sort of chronological order of things. I mean, it's great. It gives us so much to work with. But I guess like one thing that just pops up right away that I'm dying to know is, you know, like it's very evident that you are on a mission, that you know that you want to kind of, you know, commit yourself to trying to explore the ways in which we can treat a variety of different ailments that affect people through these emerging medicines. But like, I guess the question is like, was there a specific catalyst to that, or when you were in the NHL, when you're in the midst of it? This will be my question. A sport that, you know, I think for people who are listening who aren't super familiar with the inner workings of the NHL, you kind of laid it out there. Like your role was to throw your fucking weight around. Like, and there are guys on the team that are meant to do that. You know, fighting and like hitting in hockey aren't just a sort of like, sometimes it happens. It's a part of the game. Like, it is a strategical part of the game. When you were in the thick of it, did you have any thoughts about your brain health? Were discussions happening back then prior to all this stuff coming out with the NFL? Like, what was the general consensus about concussions, brain health, and you know, players, especially players that are putting themselves out there in the role that you were playing? Like, was any of that did you have any awareness then while that was going on?
No, it was never discussed. You know, we had and you guys see it, right? Guys entering into the NHL substance abuse program. That was the main introduction that we got every year. Every year you were forced to sit through watching car accidents, watching images of what cocaine did to your brain, talking about, you know, drinking and driving, making sure that you're getting into cars and Ubers and cabs, because back when I started, Uber wasn't a thing. And, you know, it's pretty well publicized that the NHL and the NFL worked together in tandem to hide this information about the risks of repetitive head trauma and concussions. Because you don't need a concussion to contract CTE, right? You can get it with just repeatedly hitting your head. And you can get damage from hitting your body, and there's no out of bounds, and we're moving at 35 miles an hour. So they actively withheld this information, and yeah, we never got talked about it. Now, I mean, listen, I'm not a dummy, right? I think there's people out there that give me a lot of shit on social media. They're like, well, you didn't know that hitting your head and fighting would have been bad. And it's not necessarily, you don't think like that, right? You just, I mean, people know how I played the game, and I played off of raw emotion, and I reacted. There was no thinking. There was no, for me personally, there was no studying. There were sheets all over the room and where you shoot on the goalie and the weaknesses of some of these people. I didn't give a shit about that. I just played, you know, and I played very much just the same way I lived my life, off of intuition and knowing where to go and knowing what levers to pull, because I was just so tapped into the emotion of it, and seeing, you know, looking at guys in their eye, you know, when you're lined up across them, and then when they look away, you just kind of know. You play against these kids, right? Your whole life. Like there's tournaments and you're in this age group. So you know a lot of these guys that make it there, right? And you know who the phonies are, and you know who the guys that you can kind of really lean on who will quit. I mean, they've always quit, right? And that doesn't really change when you get to the. But no, there was no. The thing I found really weird was when I retired, I look back on the medical system. All these medical hospitals sponsor the teams, and then the doctors that oversee the teams are the guys that work for the hospital system. And I found that to be like quite biased, you know, and then you hear about the NFL, you hear about guys that moved on. When I started to get concerned was when my friends started dying, you know, and they dissected their brain and then they had CTE. And that's really when I made a decision. But, you know, we have a protocol. There was concussion protocol. So it's a computer system and you can game it. So you saw the exact same,
Right.
I saw the exact same computer system for 12 years. You can't bomb it too much because they'll make you retake it. But you know, 70 out of you could fail 20 questions, but you know that you're a little malaise. And the reason that you do that, it's a very nuanced discussion, is because if I stay out for too long in an injury, then I'm probably going to get traded within a week or 2 weeks, and a young kid's going to. So withholding information, lying to us about the risks, never really truly, other than taking that concussion test, like we didn't get any education. Simple facts like 3 concussions and you're 80% more susceptible to neurodegenerative disease. That's a commonly known fact in the medical world. And, you know, take it a step further with Chris Simon's death. Just recently in 2017, he came out in an article and said, his family said, this guy's got CTE-like symptoms. He's really struggling. Where was the NHLPA? You know, I mean, they're managing $240 million plus of our money, you know, in a pension fund, and they give like $400,000 to the NHLAA to take care of 1,700 guys. Like somebody needs to take a fucking deep dive into what's going on over there. And they're the last league on earth to admit a link between repetitive head trauma and neurodegenerative disease. Like they still take that stance. So, you know, and I'll end on this. This is for guys who are playing now. If you think for 1 second that you're getting the best medical care available to you from a league that denies a link between you getting sick, why would they try to treat or prevent something that they don't believe in? So, you know, I pose all these questions and unfortunately, like most things, when you're a pro athlete, it's on you. Even though we play in a team, I had a very specific role. And if I'm not the healthiest, best version of myself, I won't be able to play that role. And it happens quick, within 7 to 10 days that you're gone. So it's a long-winded way of saying that the NHL, the NHLPA, the NHLAA, and this is why, you know, I don't interact in this world, by the way, guys. Like I don't, you know, I'm not going to the 10-year cup thing. I'm proud of what I did because I did it. I earned it, and I'll capitalize on it. And I use the skill set in business, but I have nothing to do with that world. My world is knowing that this league is going to make people sick, and I've created businesses that will help people get better. And that's it.
When you think about, like, just kind of hearing your answer, the first part of that about, like, you know, are you thinking about head trauma while you're in it? Like while you're playing the game? I played hockey my whole life, played junior A, got in fights, like, you know, high energy level guy, hitting all the time. I've had my bell rung many times. And when I think, like, I just go, man, you are indoctrinated into something at like an ultra early age. If you're on a trajectory to play in the NHL, I mean, like, you're talking 3 years old, like that mentality of play the game, just play the game.
How old are you?
33.
Yeah. So you were probably hitting at 3 or 4, right?
Oh, like, I mean, just like everything, contact all the time. We had hitting come into Pee Wee. The first year my Pee Wee level, that was the first year hitting came down from Bantam.
And for people who don't know,
so we're talking 11 years old.
Thanks. Yeah.
You're smashing.
11, So I started hitting at 4 before that rule got changed. Right?
like you're and then further on, like over time, you're so you're so in that mentality of like,
Mhm.
this is my teammates. I do anything for my teammates. We're a
Mhm.
unit. We go out there, we play, we work for each other. Like, to be able to step back and have that 30,000 foot view of like what's happening, what could be happening to your brain. I mean, you need the support of ethical medical professionals in the league to be able to give you that, to be able to help you be educated on that stuff. I mean, the odds of somebody being able to create that for themselves after, by the time you get to the NHL, near 20 years of just being day to day, play the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's super low. I'm curious about how you feel going through this. I mean, there's a lot of, especially over the last 10 years, like a lot of conversation around like how the game could change, should change, might change in terms of roles and things. And you've kind of seen the role of fighting kind of diminish over the years. Where do you see being on the other side of it now and having been in that role, where do you see the role that you played, and not fighting, but more so like that presence of somebody who is that you're holding somebody accountable to what they might do to your more skilled players? Like, how do you see that part of the game, it being necessary, or could it change, or is there any remedies that just in the game itself could produce possibly less people that need more care post career?
And just before you answer that, because I do want to just I know that we're a Canadian podcast. We got a bunch of fucking Canadians listening to the podcast, and there's probably a lot of Canadians listening to the podcast who are like, I know this, but there's also I'm sure there's people out there that, and I kind of talked about this, but to answer Taylor's question, if you could also just kind of give a little bit of insight into the, I guess the best way to put it is like you were a bodyguard, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the ice, but just give people insight into the sort of the mechanics of that role, like what it is that you were actually out there trying to do, just for folks who aren't in the know of like how hockey works.
Yeah. So, okay. What I believe in is information, right? So, and there's a couple reasons why I believe in this. Number one, and then, so information, the true risks, you tell these guys, hey man, you're playing this game. It's a fast game. You're getting hit all the time. You don't necessarily need to fight in order to be at risk. There's a lot of guys, Rick Nash retired early because there's tons of guys who were not enforcers that retired early. Here are the risks that you are now playing a professional sport you're getting paid to do. Yes, you're a 1099, but we should have some onus of caring about you. And these are the risks that you're taking. Okay, this is what could happen to you later because of these risks. Sign on the dotted line. And then you have information and you're educated about the risks and what you might have to deal with later. And then you sign on the dotted line. That isn't happening in the NHL. It happens everywhere else in the world. Because again, if they're not admitting a link between this repetitive head trauma and neurodegenerative disease, then they don't view concussions or repetitive head trauma as risky. So they're not going to educate their players. And so I'm all about informed consent. And a lot of people get angry, and I'll touch on this on your question, the follow-on question. But like hitting and fighting is a part of the game, and it's a beautiful part of the game. And not a lot of people have really broken down why like how beautiful it is, which I'll do here in a second. So informed consent, everybody's a big boy. You're an adult. I got drafted at 17, 18. I was walking you grow up fast in hockey because it's such a hard sport. And so that's what I believe in. I do not believe that hitting should be taken out of the game. I do not believe that fighting should be taken out of the game. Okay. So that's it. I do believe in informed consent. Now, when I played the game, okay, at 4 years old and growing up in King City, Ontario, we were told to take the will of a player's ability or want to touch the puck. And if you can do that through physical force, then that is when you see people starting to hesitate, and then that's when you're going to get goals. And that is the age-old adage of winning the Stanley Cup. Over 7 games, you test that team's will to go through the wall, right? And so that never changes. In the regular season, it's a little different, but that never changes over that 7-game series to win the championship. So there's not a lot of fighting that happens, but you guys see the intensity and the hitting, et cetera, that happens. So during the year, and then during the year, your goal is to gain as many points as you can to put your team in the best position health-wise, right? And points-wise to get a top seed and to make your run a little bit easier. But really, there's no easy series. Okay, I think we see that now with all the parity in the NHL. So my goal and one of my jobs. So I want to be really clear. I was kind of this new age enforcer where I came into the league. I was a 30-goal scorer. I was drafted 72nd overall in 2003, and 30-goal scorer every single year in the OHL. And a lot of people in the Penguins organization would say, like, why are you fighting so much? Like, you could make it as a hockey player. And I just viewed it as, number one, I had trauma that I didn't quite realize, and I was an angry kid. And number two, I liked the fact of mentally looking at somebody and testing their will. It's just, I don't know why, but from a very young age, I was always kind of pushing that line, and
it's thrilling.
And I've always been getting told, like, my dad's like, you're gonna get the shit kicked out. I'm like, great, hasn't happened yet, but let's find out. So and coming up in the league, I was a very skilled player. In the first year, I went into professional hockey. I graduated high school, drafted at 17, graduated high school, 18 turning 19, right into pro hockey where, there's families in the room and the guys are 40 and there's journeymen and all this stuff. And I was 165 pounds when I got drafted. So that summer I put on 30 pounds because I played the game very hard. And I knew, and I have a moral compass, I don't back down. If I hit somebody, I fight them. And that was just the unspoken code of hockey and being a man, And so within this game, this isn't real life. You hit somebody, you damn well know that somebody's going to stick up for them. It's just, it's what men do. And it's what a teammate does. So I knew that going in, I'm like, So my first fight was Kevin Cawley, he was really tough. And I beat the wheels off him. And all these guys, you got to understand, I went to training camp with all these French guys for 3 years, and they never saw me fight, right? And they're like, then I showed up at camp, I was big, and they're like, what the hell is going on here? And I just viewed it as I could skate, I could shoot, I'm skilled, I can hit, and then now I can fight. So it's just like, it's like another thing on my resume that's going to help me break into the league. And it did, after a year and a half, but I scored 21 goals in the AHL. Nobody talks about that. That's a hard thing to do. And then I got traded to Arizona, and Wayne was my coach, and Ulf Samuelsson and Grant Fuhr, and it was like an old school room. And, it was Arizona at the time was like where guys went to die, but I broke in. I think I scored in my first year 13 goals. I led the league in penalty minutes. I did it, but I made a name for myself where I liked to fight, and so from 20 to 25, I played the game hard. We had a lot of young kids coming in, but I was like, I could play. And then eventually I asked for a trade out of Arizona after 2.5 years because I wanted to go to a market that was going to respect and really like. And so then I got traded to Philly. And then that's when, I was watching the other day. I posted a couple of my fight montages because I'm proud of what I did. It was hard, and there was 48 minutes of a fight montage of when I got traded. I guess somebody made a fight video, and I fought.
That's a lot of minutes fighting.
So yeah, but it was it's a role, and it's something that I feel passionate about because it is all about psychology, and when you're in the room, there's a chalkboard, right, of their lineup, and then what line you're on, and who you're getting matched up against because your home team has the last change, and who can fight, and you also know, and the other side knows that if anybody fucks around, I don't know if we could swear on this podcast, but
please fucking do not.
If anybody touches Daniel Briere or Claude Giroux, Mike Richards to take care of himself, but still, Jeff Carter, Pronger, whatever, Timonen, if anybody fucks around, they know that I'm going to come at them. And sometimes I would fight, but sometimes I would just spear people, or I would cross-check them in the fucking face, or I would do something where at that point in my life, I didn't know what I was going to do to you. And I'm dead serious when I say that. But I had free reign on Philly to do whatever I wanted, you know, and so that kept people in check during that game, you know, and if that's in check, if people are in check, then my guys on my side who put pucks in the net, Billy, Leno, Hart, all these guys, they've got free reign to do their thing, you know, and so it works. It's a nice marriage between again, it's like that graph or whatever. Fuck around, fine. Not a lot of guys would do that when I was out there.
It's a beautiful like. I just want to say that I really appreciate like the intellectual breakdown of that role, because I think it's way too common for people to think that people who are in that role are just like turned off at the wheel and they're just like out there doing whatever.
But they do, because you know, we almost gave it a bad name, right? Like, it's like the fucking game that starts and is like, throw down your gloves and fucking. It's like, dude, I never, ever fucking did that, because you have to earn a fucking fight with me. So what I would say to guys is like, I would tell guys like, well, go and do something. Go hit somebody, or, you know, and that's what I would do. Like, I would earn fights, you know, and some guys, like, I would see it. Most guys were fucking bigger than me, man. But I would see it where I would go and earn this fight, and it'd be like, fuck, okay, well, now I'm in this role and I have to do this. And I would beat the fuck out of those guys because I liked doing it.
Daniel, when you said that you had free reign to do what you wanted in Philly, and like talking about that, like earning the fight, and like looking at that other guy and go and him sort of like giving off this sense that like, oh fuck, like I have to go and fight now. Did you ever feel that? Like, did you ever feel the pressure of the role from the organization or the team to like go and get involved in things that like maybe you didn't feel like that night?
Yeah, I mean, there were nights first of all, it's a job, regardless of how people view it. Like, it does become a job. And some nights, you know, you want to go to work, and some nights you don't. And some nights you're like, okay, I'm not going to do anything because I know Darcy Hordichuk's over there, right? And like, so I'm going to do my job, but I'm not going to go crazy, right? And again, that's the reverse of not having a person in that role that can hold you accountable. And so, yes, there were nights that I didn't. Also, too, I will say, you know, from a mental health perspective, when I was 19 to 25, I got injured. So like, that's when all my injuries happened. And I was on and off the ice. I was running hard, you know? And at 25, I had to ask for help. Right. And I had to ask for help because I had 2 surgeries back to back. We got on these these things called opiates. And that's when it was a little bit of an epidemic. I didn't know what I was taking, and I asked for help, and thank God I did, because then I went to Malibu and I started to learn about breath work and meditation and Indian sweat and just different techniques of how to down-regulate visualization, you know, obviously like meditation and stuff. So, but like what happened was, so from 25 to 30, when I was living somewhat of a regular life, that's when I went to the Stanley Cup Finals 4 times with 3 different teams, and I was a great teammate, and a lot of really good things started to happen to me. But in between those 5 years, I fought differently. Like, you can go and look at my fights from 2010 to 2015, and you can just see that my head's a little bit back. Like, I basically fought like Paul Bissonnette, who fought scared, right? Who didn't want to kind of get hit. And earlier, I would stick my chin out there and I would fucking roast people. You know, I didn't care. So again, it goes to the thinking. It goes to, if you are thinking too much in a game that is so fast, and if I'm there thinking about the damage that I'm incurring, and then I'm thinking about the damage that I'm giving somebody else, who most of these guys I knew and I liked, like most enforcers like each other, then it starts to muddy the water. And that becomes a little bit difficult. So you have to guard against that.
Can you tell us a little? So, you know, you obviously got we like to say bonked up. You got all bonked up a few times, aka head injuries. how did concussions, you talked about CTE earlier, and for people who aren't familiar, CTE is the sort of like chronic brain injury that is a result of multiple concussions. But as it stands right now, and maybe I'm wrong, but as it stands right now, the only way to be diagnosed with CTE is postmortem.
Yeah, so multiple concussions, and so it's not just concussions. You can contract CTE by just repetitive head trauma. So you don't need to be diagnosed with a concussion.
Okay,
and
perfect.
yes, you're right. The only way to definitively know if you have CTE is to dissect your brain postmortem after you're dead.
So with that in mind, one of the things that you mentioned earlier that I thought was quite interesting, I've never actually heard anybody talk about it before over the the lifespan of this podcast, is that there are like CTE like symptoms that people can tend to present. And so obviously there's speculation there. They've had multiple head traumas. They're showing these signs. Firstly, what are those? And then secondly, how have the head traumas that you have experienced over the span of your career had a direct effect on you, your daily life, your relationships, your mental health? Like, how have concussions and just repetitive head trauma affected you overall?
Well, I will say that I am immensely grateful for all of the injuries that I sustained, because I am completely cured of any of those symptoms. I have cured myself of, doctors are telling me I had mild dementia and that I had incurable CTE.
Holy fuck.
And this was in 2019, before I went to that farm, and I am cured today. Obviously, you guys can see and hear that I am. And I have medical records to show that. This is why I initiated the FDA drug development program, et cetera. So what I was dealing with, these are common dementia-like symptoms. Now, if anybody's listening and you're a hockey player out there, one of my beefs is with the medical system. You cannot tell an athlete who's a high operating individual who is already scared that they have CTE-like symptoms, because you cannot diagnose until you're dead. And you also, a lot of people think that that's a death wish. And so if you're listening and you're a hockey player, what you have are brain injury symptoms, okay? You've been hit in the head and you have brain injury symptoms, and you can get better. You can actually reverse the signs of those symptoms exactly like I have. So what was I dealing with? In 2019 or 15, I was dealing with slurred speech, headache, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues, light sensitivity, weight loss, appetite loss. I was a complete shell of myself. I was dealing with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation on top of those things. Now, my daily regimen, and I had kids at the time after I retired, was to, I was taking pharmaceuticals and prescribed opiates by these doctors, and I would pretty much stay up until 4 a.m. and then sleep until 4 p.m. because I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to hear anybody. And at the time I just had one child. And so it was manageable. My wife knew that I was pretty fucked up, and that it was because of these hits. So I took 6 months after I retired to pretty much just sleep. And I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to see any of my former teammates. I didn't go to the Stanley Cup banner raising in 2015. Like, I was like, I just shut everybody out. So I was isolating. And, but eventually I started to get up and I started to, try to get a hold of these symptoms, because in the back of my mind, for whatever reason, I knew that, number one, when I was playing in the NHL and hockey, like, I knew that, like, I was kind of bored of it towards the end. I'm like, fuck, there's got to be something else. Like, this is kind of, this can't be it. Like, just pushing a puck around the ice and all this stuff. And I've always kind of been interested in other things, mainly like, things that not a lot of people think about, like, which is like, how did we get here? Where do we go? Where's it all going to be put? How were we born? Like, consciousness and spirituality and these types of things. So, but I knew that, there was something bigger for me, and always kind of felt that from a young age. And so, I just continued through the medical system, started to get up after 6 months and started to go to these doctors. And one of my things, again, is one of my specialties is intuition and listening and knowing immediately when someone's full of fucking shit or when they're telling me the truth. And so, although I took some of these pharmaceuticals for like a year or so, I knew that kind of market was full of shit, because they prescribe you things that then bring on other symptoms that they warn you about that
Yeah.
obviously increase suicidality, and then they prescribe you more and more and more. And it's like, it doesn't
It's a
make any
Band-Aid,
sense.
but it's a Band-Aid that's just seeping poison.
And it numbs you out, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, so again, I just started moving through and vestibular ocular training. Okay, great. Like, this made me feel great, but I'm not going to keep paying you guys, $12,000 a week. Like, I'm going to go broke. I don't know who can do this. And then you'd feel good, obviously, for the week that you were there, but then the symptoms would fall away. And those are all these concussion clinics. And I warn people about them. They're good for teenagers and like adolescents and stuff, because obviously they can't take these emerging medicines if you're not over 21. But if you're over 21, just be very careful of these places. And then just started going through like the hormone replacement. Just did my own research, man. You have to be your own citizen scientist, because these doctors don't read it in a book. The only thing they read in a book is they ask you these questions on a MADRS scale, it's called. This is how they diagnose depression. It's 10 questions that say, do you feel sad today? How sad do you feel? That allows them to then take this score and match you up with Wellbutrin or one of these synthetic compounds that haven't been researched for longer than 6 months. Like, the whole thing is, it's pretty wild when you dig into it. And so I started to see these studies done on these other compounds that are natural, albeit in the clinical trials it's synthetic, but I knew where to get these natural medicines, showing a ton of efficacy for literally reforming the brain, something called neuroplasticity, which is something that I kept hearing in these clinics, which is we're going to identify an area of your brain shut down due to trauma, and we're going to wake it back up by these exercises. I thought, amazing. Well, here are these substances that usually cost in between $30 to $40 to grow that do it, that are potent neuroanti-inflammatories that have been proven in these trials to do it. So I saw that, and I took an invitation, and everything in my bones and in my body was telling me not to go, because what happens is, when you identify being sick for so long, sometimes there's some part of you that feels a little comfortable, where everybody's kind of catering to you, walking on eggshells and all this stuff. And it's like, well, I for whatever reason, man, I went, and if I didn't go, I wouldn't be here. I know that for sure, because I was actively making plans to take my own life, unburden my family. I didn't view it as a selfish thing. And here I am today, man, 5 years later, still with clear brain scans. I test my stuff every 6 months, clear blood work, couldn't be more high operating, couldn't be more in the present moment. There's things that continue to pull me into the darkness, but I try to keep in the light as much as I can. The dog is still there, but it's there for different reasons, and it comes out, and it needs to come out when things like we hear about Chris Simon. And then, what makes me upset is when the NHLPA like puts up this photo of him, and then they're not going to say another thing about him for years. They don't give a fuck. They really don't care, but they'll use him as an asset. So, yeah, man, I mean, my life is, is really just mirrored in trying to be an example for concussion survivors who get told that they have this deadly new normal that they must endure and live by. And I'm here to say that's bullshit. You can get better than you were even before your injury.
Yeah.
And I'm an example of it.
We've talked on the show quite a bit over the last 9 years about the benefits of psychedelics and the potential that exists there to really change the world in many different ways. Oftentimes when we speak about it, it's from the standpoint of like shifting your mentality. So, the example I'll use is when we spoke to Thomas Hartle, who is he was the first Canadian to receive sort of like a compassionate care access to utilize psilocybin to manage his end of life anxiety. He has terminal cancer. There's no cure. He's going to die. And so he does this, like heroic dose of psilocybin under the guidance of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And he comes out of that experience with next to no anxiety about the fact that he's going to die, which is, it's mind blowing.
It's unbelievable that story, like anecdotally,
Totally.
was,
And the guy never smoked smoked a joint in his life. He never really was like
he was a
drinker.
computer engineer.
Just a nerd who was like, you know what? I'm going to fucking try this and he was seeing the same stuff from you, like stuff from Matt, stuff from John Hopkins. And he was going, it seems like there's something here. But again, that focus was more, oftentimes when we talk about this, we're talking about it from the point of like shifting the way that you view the world. So like, your mentality, as opposed to what I'm kind of taking from you is like, okay, there is an issue in the brain where it's injured. And this is healing that injury, which I think is very different from just shifting the way that you think or view the world. Which is a bit like kind of a, I don't know. Like,
I feel like one's like in front of the curtain and one's behind the curtain.
Yeah. Let me expand on that. So in my journey, okay, I'll just tell you from my own experience what happened. I came to, and most people that come to ceremony are called to it. Okay, it's you can't force anybody to do it, just like you can't force an addict to get well. I came to the ceremony suicidal, wanting to know why I was so angry, and my other intention was I wanted to heal my brain. Two simple intentions. What mushrooms do is it exasperates what's at the forefront of your mind. And so when I dosed for 2.5 hours, I was lost on a farm, continuing to go in this loop, inside, outside, just screaming, what is this? Dry heaving, purging this energy of, like, I was extremely dark, angry, frustrated, sad at the position that I was in, being lied to for so many years, and then all my friends passing away, or a lot of my friends passing away. And I had this thought, okay, and this rumination, and this is where I was in my life. I was stuck in this negativity. I thought I was doing such a good job advocating for what had happened to me and the league that lied to us and all this stuff. You guys may have seen me back then where I was extremely dark and negative. All of a sudden, about 2 hours in, after my friend kind of put his hand on me, asked if I was okay, it's this thought. I had this thought. The thought was, well, you can just stop. You can just stop thinking this way. You can just stop being so negative, and you can start to, which is what I'm doing right now. This sickness will always be here. This medicine told me. What you can do, if you want to, it's up to you, is change your thinking, and we're going to help you get better so that you can think properly, right? So that's the other side. But spiritually, we need you to commit to doing things in a more positive manner. And so I was like, well, the only reason I was there was to regain my health and to continue to be an advocate for something, for either it's for concussions and the risk, and now it's something different. And so it was just that, it was that simple. And then up until that point, 2.5 hours, you can consider that a bad trip or a difficult trip.
Sure.
But then I lied down, and I felt this unmeasurable amount of love, this unconditional love radiating through me, which is similar to what people report in a lot of these high doses and in these clinical trials, which is why somebody who's terminally ill, who's going to die, who should be fearful, is no longer fearful, because what happens is this medicine makes you more connected to yourself. And yes, of course, it heals the brain, etc., but it heals your spirituality, and it does not numb out like SSRIs do or antidepressants. It gets to the root cause of these issues, and you have these profound realizations that you are in control, and how you think, how you view the world, and how you interact with it is all on you. And I'm used to that. I'm used to those harsh messages because we grew up in hockey, right? And so, and I swear to you guys, I have not looked back since that day. There's times where I can get drawn in with certain comments that I've already made on this podcast. But, it's not like I'm drawn in for 3 or 4 weeks, or it's a nice place to be, you know? So those are the two kind of dichotomies. Now, on top of the spirituality aspect of making everything kind of, you feel more connected to yourself. You don't identify with what doctors are telling you, you know, and I shouldn't say this, but like Big Pharma has been around for 100 years. Like they made these indications up, right? And they made these indications up in order to sell us medication for it. Now, I need the indications to stick because we need to identify with being sick in order to get better. But, you know, anybody out there who's listening to this, you have the ability to change what you're doing and how you view the world. Now, these medicines help you get there faster, but you can do it on your own with exercise, with changing your diet, with radically looking at your sleep routines, alcohol intake, sugar intake, if you really, truly are sick and want to get better. This is just one tool, but it's an accelerant. And yeah, I've seen it work for hundreds of veterans and first responders and athletes that have had a history of repetitive head trauma.
I really connect with that idea of like that during that experience, like having this thought that just sticks. I remember leaving sports in my early 20s and you know, like experimenting recreationally with psychedelics, in particular with psilocybin, and sitting around with a group of friends one night in like a really sort of like therapeutic, unintentionally, I guess, setting. And I had this thought in the moment where I was like, oh fuck. Like I looked out onto the horizon and was like, oh, none of that matters. Like the only thing that matters is my friends that I'm here with right now. And I had this moment of like truly realizing that like my friends are what's important to me. And like in that moment, I just felt like I knew something that I would never forget. And like to this day, it's become like a important part of, you know, my belief system.
And I will say it's very, very important to have these realizations, to have somebody there who's set up this experience, because you know that you're safe and you know that you're able to kind of surrender.
Totally.
Surrendering to this is extremely important on high dose, which pieces of you die, no doubt about it, right? So you have to be calm enough and feel safe enough to go with, you know, seeing these lessons. But then number 3, man, is like, dude, what do you do after? I could have woke up the next day and I could have went back on Twitter and I could have smashed, you know, the NHL and all. But it stuck. That one thought stuck with me, and I knew I wanted to get better for my kids. At this point, I had 3, and so you know, eternally grateful for like how, number 1, how difficult that was, and then number 2, like having the strength and the support system to be able to integrate some of these lessons and then live by them, right? It's all well and good to go and do the thing, but then when you come back to your life, if you're not living by the lessons that you learn, then in my mind, you're just doing substances, you know.
It's so interesting. It's so just the idea, the thought of like is it the way that you see the world around you that affects the brain, or is it the brain that's affecting the world around you? And like, or is it different at different times?
Well,
and
we
like,
can get, I mean, this is the type of stuff I like talking about because, you know, it goes back to like deja vu, right? It's like, wait a minute, I've been here. So who is Daniel behind his eyes? Like, I know that there's something else to me. Right. And, you know, I listen to a lot of philosophers, and Wayne Dyer puts it this way, right? His mom recently died, and he went up and did a speech, and he said, if you weighed my mom a minute before she died, and you weighed my mom after, there's no change, but she's not there in this body. And if we are limitless, right? If our consciousness is energy, then it has to go somewhere. These are the types of things that I enjoy thinking about and talking about. And my wife thinks I'm nuts, but she's like, I don't want to hear this stuff. I don't question where I go or how we got here. And, you know, it's really cool to have, this is why I love kids, because they're so close to God or the higher power, or, you know, because they're so simple, and
they haven't had that like layering of shit on them over time.
And they're like, the neuroplasticity, right? But this is what these psychedelics do, is they turn you back, they turn your brain and your spirit back into this formidable area, or it gives you a chance to reset. You know, it really does. And that's why I think I dig it. And it's, and then I'm a well person now. I'll just say this. So this isn't just for sick people. Okay.
Yeah.
If you are a well person and you would like to enhance access to your brain and experience the neural benefits of an anti-inflammatory and get better sleep and recovery and be more creative and increase cognitive processing, and you're an athlete and you want to, you know, increase your hand-eye coordination and all of these things, this medicine, heart rate variability, can do that, right? Psilocybin specifically, and some others too. But I will mention that right now we focus on sick because of the stigma associated in order to open up these adult therapeutic use states like Oregon and all this other stuff. But I've been a well person for 4 years, man. And like, it just continues to serve me as long as I don't abuse it, you know, because I'm sure you guys have seen, you abuse something like mushrooms, it's going to smack you in the face.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
On the curiosity part, just something that I'm not sure if you guys have seen this, and I'm sure that you'd be interested if you haven't seen this already, Dan, is you guys know the YouTuber Vsauce?
Yeah.
So he did this he did a series for YouTube. I think it was called like Into the Mind or something like that. And there was one episode where he focused on he had a participant agree to sign up. They did fMRI on him, I believe a handful of times, like leading up to going down to either Peru or Ecuador to do an ayahuasca ceremony. They did fMRI. He had some type of like mobile fMRI that he took with him that he imaged this guy's brain. Can't remember if he did it during ceremony or right after. I'm not sure. It was a while ago that I saw the video.
Because you can wear it while you're moving.
Yeah, so it was like some type of like portable imaging device, and he wore it during it.
Sorry to cut you off.
Mindfield. That's right.
Cool.
So he had it on him during ceremony, during the experience ayahuasca, and then had like follow-ups. And it was a ceremony, like I think he did 2 or 3 days of this ceremony. And he kind of clearly explains from the imaging perspective, like what they're seeing on the pre, during, and post, and what's going on. And that there's these, if I'm recalling it correctly, like really clear like new brain pathways that are like immediately available to somebody after an experience with ayahuasca, which they were kind of saying like, this is where we think this sensation of clarity, and that all of a sudden these things that have been causing you so many problems, these obstacles that you felt like you couldn't get over, all of a sudden you've got 100 new highways in your brain to try and process these obstacles. And after these experiences, it's like you get this overwhelming sense of clarity, and they last for a very long time, as opposed to, you know, something like an opiate that's really just a Band-Aid for a, you know, whatever the symptom that's on the surface is.
Yeah. But again, the important part there is also considering the integration process after that. So it doesn't just go to waste, right?
Yeah.
Daniel, I'm curious if you, I'm a big talk therapy guy. Like I identified too with being like a well person. Now I first went to see a therapist about 4 years ago now, and didn't really realize the extent of like the sort of like childhood trauma that I had that wasn't addressed, and have started working on that stuff, and have since I just believe in going to therapy once a month just to have this sort of like, third party perspective, not so much the perspective of the therapist, but like the time to actually sit and like be with my thoughts and sort of like reflect and gain a deeper perspective on like how I responded in certain situations that maybe felt uncomfortable that previous month. And to me, that's like sort of a, not so much integration, but it's a part of like staying well is having this practice of doing that. But I'm curious for you, like, have you done talk therapy? Do you see much value in that on a personal level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that talk therapy is extremely important. So with a lot of these medicines going through the FDA, there's 90 hours of talk therapy associated with the outcomes. So it's not just the medicine. And I would argue that it's probably more so has to do with the talk therapy. So I believe in it. I've had 15 years of talk therapy. I don't necessarily have a therapist now, but I get a lot out of, leading people and helping people both prep and then go through ceremony. I would say, we're building a tech tool, which is like basically a warehouse for therapists, facilitators, talk therapists in every single state, so that people can access it. And it's pivotal. It's extremely important, especially when you're, thinking about how placid somebody's brain is after one of these experiences, and their spirit. You have to really guide them responsibly back into their life and ensure that certain things don't happen, right? I've seen a lot of people go the other way, where they get lost with these medicines, and all of a sudden they're leaving their wife of 10 years and 2 kids, and they're into polygamy, and they're into some really weird stuff now. And it happens,
Sounds like our yoga trainings.
Well, it does. It actually does. It actually really does. And like, cause I mean, you said that before, Daniel, like, there's a few ways to get to the top of this mountain, and some of them require like 100 things that you need to carefully consider every day for the rest of your life. And sometimes you can have access to something like psilocybin that'll help you get there a little bit quicker, make some realizations a little bit faster. But like, when you get that wave of intense like revelation and you don't have the integration afterwards, it's kind of it can be a breeding ground for bad decision making, or impulsive decision making based on this wave of this new feeling. And to have that integration is really important.
It can definitely be destabilizing for some people, and some people don't qualify, right? Like there's people that come to us all the time that it's like, hey man, no, you got to do these things in order to, or you have this background in your family history, and we can't, unfortunately, right? This psilocybin isn't right for you.
What type of, like, what would be a background that might prevent somebody from doing that?
So things like bipolar, schizophrenia, that's like kind of deeply rooted, certain antipsychotic medications, people need to either titrate down or be off completely. High doses of SSRIs. So just there's a myriad of things. We're basically following, John Hopkins and some other institutions that use these kind of intake processes to figure out if you qualify or not.
Right.
I remember when I read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, whenever that came out years ago, I was like, I like Brian said, like recreationally, I'd been messing around with, things like psilocybin pretty regularly. But then when I read How to Change Your Mind, I was like, whoa, this is nuts. I cannot believe the history of this, the suppression of this, and the obvious benefits on multiple different levels, from being sick to getting well perspective, from like a maintenance perspective to like an optimization perspective. I was like, I really couldn't believe it.
And we live in a really exciting time, a time where like this is, again, emerging. It's something that the wheels are turning, and in 5 years, we might be in a position where this sort of thing is available to more than just a select few people who get access through whether it's compassionate care or signing up for trials or what have you. So
we're a lot closer to getting there with people like Daniel on this planet.
Yeah.
Well, it's, so I will say, for people listening and interested, right now, Oregon is open for business. So you can legally go access a statewide regulated framework if you're 21 years older and you qualify after the intake process. So they have licensed facilitators. They have licensed service centers. They have also licensed manufacturers of the mushroom, which is full spectrum mushrooms. You'll get a full spectrum cubensis mushroom. It's not synthetic like you'll get in a clinical trial, or and then it's there's licensed testing facilities, so you can know that there's no adulterants, etc. There's 23. So Colorado Prop 122, they also passed. They just submitted their rules, their board rules, to create this same framework, very similar framework. There are 21 other states that have some form in the United States that have some form of adult therapeutic use regulations to create some type of framework, legislation to create some type of framework similar to Oregon and Colorado. So it's happening. One is open right now.
Ooh.
There's FDA approved ketamine that people can do through, even in Canada, through Johnson & Johnson owns that drug. It's called Spravato or S-ketamine. So it's an intranasal. You do it. You have to stay in a clinic for 2 hours. But we owned and operated a bunch of those, and we saw some pretty amazing results with depression and anxiety, eating disorders, PTSD. It's approved for treatment-resistant depression, meaning you have to try 3 other medications that don't work, and then you can access it. MDMA for PTSD that works 71% of the time in 2 phase 3 confirmatory trials is going for an NDA submission, a new drug application with the FDA currently, and we should have first round of approval answers, not saying that it will get approved by mid-August of this year.
Cool.
So Compass Pathways in phase 3, Usona's in phase 2 for MDD, Compass Pathway using psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. So I will say, there are things here now, and just not a lot of people know about it, because unlike Big Pharma that's hijacking every single major sports tournament and commercials with their creative marketing, we can't market on the TV because these are still scheduled substances, although not Schedule 1. Now they have medicinal value. But ketamine's been used as an anesthesia in wars since the 50s. So it's like,
crazy.
But anyway, I put that out there, and it's there's a lot more that people can access than they realize right now.
Well, Daniel, this has been amazing, dude. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to sit down and chat with us. How can people find you if they want to find the work that you're up to, and anything else that people who are fans of this conversation should know?
Yeah. So thanks for asking. So people can follow me on Instagram, where we have, webinars. I've created a community called The Crew. There's over 700 people there now, where we so tonight at 8 p.m. there's a free webinar where I'll basically, talk for 30 minutes on a specific topic and then answer any questions about some of these emerging medicines or concussion or hockey, whatever. So Daniel Carcillo 13 on Instagram, Carbon Boom 13 on X. And LinkedIn's my name, Facebook's my name, and people can find me there.
Thanks so much, dude. This has been a real treat.
Awesome.
We really appreciate it. Well, that was a fascinating conversation about being all bonked up.
Yep, super bonked.
It was, yeah.
I gotta say, I was a little bit thrown off by how hot and heavy Mr. Carbon came in on his true thoughts on the NHLPA, which I was like, yeah, dude, thick content.
I thought you were gonna.
This is great.
I thought you were gonna say you were hot and bothered by how handsome he was.
He's pretty handsome.
He's a handsome guy.
Yeah, and but yeah, what a great conversation. And also, it's like I don't know, after that conversation and after watching the Leafs lose yet again to Boston in the 7th game, continuing their streak of losing to Boston in the playoffs. I think we're up 4 or 5 decades now of having not beat that fucking team.
Okay, all right.
I'm done with the NHL, I think. I think I'm done with the NHL.
Do you
And the
wanna hear
NHLPA.
Do you want to hear a crazy stat that Jeff told me the other day?
Sure.
He told me that
Jeff,
Leafs,
the manager of this podcast.
the Leafs have never made it past a second round ever. Like when they won the Stanley Cup, there were so few teams in the NHL
Whoa.
that there was never a second round. There wasn't even a second
Man,
round.
it
of the
sucks being a
playoffs.
Leafs fan. And I'm a Leafs fan by blood. Like it's not even I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Fuck. Anyway,
Like your
whatever.
family.
So anyway, that conversation and the Leafs loss got us so bonked up that we're gonna leave it to that this week. It was actually kind of a long recording, so instead of doing a wrap up, we're gonna wrap it up right here. A reminder: Breathless out now. The podcast series that's going to be releasing all throughout the month of May, Cystic Fibrosis Awareness Month, where we've created this show that explores what life with CF means now and in the future, considering that there's this life-changing drug.
And it's really amazing. First episode is out now. Maybe even second episode.
Second episode dropped today.
And you're going to love it.
So go give it a listen. If And I'll say this, like I've actually had quite a few people that have reached out that are listeners of this show, and they tuned into the very first episode. And although they are, longtime listeners of Sick Boy and they're very aware of my story and all the stuff that's come up on the show, there's so much more in-depth kind of learning to cystic fibrosis and like my experience with it that are in even just that first episode. And it is a tearjerker. So get your tissues ready. If you like emoting, well, that's the podcast for you.
Emote.
So thanks for tuning in, folks. We really hope you enjoyed this. Next week, can't wait to bring you a wonderful conversation with a lovely doctor all about Mental Health Awareness Month, which also happens to fall on the same month as Cystic Fibrosis Awareness Month. It's a lot in 1 month.
It's mental health week.
Oh, thanks.
It's only a week.
But it's in the month of May.
May 6th to 12th.
There you go.
There
Nice.
you go. They'll get their month.
Attaboy.
They'll get their.
Yeah.
Is it actually?
full month
It is, yeah.
Fuck
eventually.
yeah. So are we nice? Cool. Good fucking timing on releasing that episode. So that's going to be great. And actually, I'm going to ask you guys now up front, just to prep everybody for that episode next week for the wrap up. Are you guys cool if I show you one of the most fucking disgusting things I've ever seen in my life?
Absolutely.
It's really gross.
I don't know. Am I?
I don't know if you are. It's nightmare fuel. It's nightmare fuel.
Is it worse than trypophobia?
Way worser.
Ooh, I don't know.
I don't
if
have
like that.
trypophobia though, so yes, of course, everything is worse than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, then you have that to look forward to next week as well. Now, in the meantime, head on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever app you're using and hit the follow button if you're not already, and leave a like and leave a comment, or just, I don't know, if you can interact with it in any way, do that because it helps us.
And tell your mom about it.
Yeah, tell your mom. And if you don't have a mom, tell your dad. And if you don't have a mom or a dad, I'm so sorry. Tell somebody else's mom or dad.
Tell your father figure.
That's it.
Yep.
And if we're your father figure, don't tell us. Find somebody 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 else.
Yeah. And if you'd like to tell us that and about your entire life experience with dealing with an illness, you can go to sickboypodcast.com and fill out the guest form and be a guest on the show.
I thought you were
Actually,
going to
yes.
say.
I just want to say, please, actually, we're ramping up for a new round of recordings with sickos. So
Do that.
get your applications in.
Yeah, do that. And thanks as always to the people who helped make this show happen. A huge thank you to Jeff, who I just mentioned only minutes ago. So thanks, Jeff, for all your work for us and also your great insights about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And thanks also to Rich O'Coin.
The fucking word just puts a sour taste in my mouth. That's it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jeremy, and this is Sick Boy.